I'm starting the broadcast. Good morning. Welcome to the third DBA Fundamentals virtual chapter meeting for July. Today we have Grant Fritchey, otherwise known as Scary DBA, presenting Extending DevOps to SQL Server. I'll be turning things over to Grant in a minute, but first I have to do a little housekeeping. Let me get the screen going. Our sponsors, SentryOne, has tons of free stuff, just tons. And you really ought to check out some of this. And specifically, I would hope that you would do a little bit and help us out a little bit as far as sponsorship. I told them that I would put in a little plug for a presentation that they're giving, and I don't have the date on there. I'm sorry. It's in I think in 2 or 3 days, but it's investigating TempDB. If you want to kind of print key this and go to SentryOne and look at that and investigate TempDB presentation, I would appreciate it, and kind of say that you came via us. That would kind of help out with sponsorships, because sponsorships allow us to put these presentations on and also allow us to give away prizes. So help them out, help us out, and help you out. Thank you. 24 hours of pass is coming up, and one of our very own is going to be helping with that. Shane ONeill is going to be doing a presentation. Shane, can you tell me which one you're going to be doing? If you want to unmute yourself.
I'm not doing a presentation. I'm going to be moderating.
Well, you're moderating. I'm sorry. So which one are you doing?
We have Ernst Leto on Query Store and Ginger Grant on SQL Server and Python.
So you're going to do 2 of them. Good. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sign up for that. You'll love. There's tons of content, and that's happening tomorrow and the next day. So go to that link and sign up. And this is probably the last presentation before the deadline for pass, upping the amount of money that it costs to go to the Pass Summit. Now, the Pass Summit is fantastic. It really is. You want to go if you can. You can save money by using our code, along with a lot of other people have got codes. Ours is VC15GBQ6. You save $150 just by using that code. And we also put you in a drawing for an Amazon gift card if you just simply use our code. We're going to give away one $500 Amazon gift card to one of the people that have used it. And so far, 38 people have used our code, so it's not a whole lot. So there's a pretty good chance if you want to get in on that. Also, if you're a new person for the first time going to the Pass Summit, be sure and point that out. Remember, July the 23rd, we won't have another session before that, so sign up if you're going to. This is the time to do it. Again, same stuff. It's a pretty expensive thing, so it's $20. Let's see, right now it was $18.95. It's going to go up another $300. So go ahead, if you're going to go, do it now and save the money. We've got a session coming up down under with Azure SQL Data Warehouse. We also have Kendra Little doing a session in September. She substituted for Jess Borland, who had to drop out. Her session has been moved to 2018, but Kendra's going to be giving one on SSMS shortcuts and secrets, and we haven't got it up yet. We haven't got all the details worked out, but I think David Clee's going to be giving one for us on 8.16 about SQL 2017 on Linux. So that should be interesting to a lot of people. There's some of our sessions in the future. We haven't got everything up yet, but we put up things once we have them booked. There's lots of other virtual chapters or virtual groups, as we're now called. Go to Pass and check out all of the different groups you can join. One thing we will be doing, we give away a lot of money in big cards, usually about every 3 months. One of the things that we're going to require is that you be a member of Pass when you receive this. So people that are watching from YouTube and other locations, go ahead and join up. It doesn't hurt you to be joined up, and you can have access to a lot of other information. SQL Saturdays are mini Pass summits that happened in locations close to you because Pass was set up by users and is still run by users, and we know that you can't always travel to the Seattle, where it's been like 80–90% of the time, mainly because of Microsoft. But these SQL Saturdays are mini events. It's also a good place for people to learn to present. There's great presenters that come out of here. You'll get a lot of free education, and most of the time all it costs you is lunch. These are some of the ones that are showing up in the next couple of weeks. We just had one in Atlanta, so I really wish I'd got to go to that one. But anyway, here's some of the future ones. Go to SQLSaturday.com and you can check and see if there's anything close to you. Our sessions will be recorded, and you can go to dbafund.org and go to our meeting archive and see the stuff from there and pick up scripts. If you just want the sessions, you can go to dbafundtube.org, and we have all of our sessions out there. So if you want to bookmark this or hit the little camera at the top right-hand side, you can keep this on your PC. Okay. Well, I guess we're ready for the presentation. Grant Fritchey, if you don't know, has been in the industry for a while now, and as my co-host Shane pointed out just a few minutes ago, off of the MVP Twitter account from Microsoft, Redgate has got over 25 years of MVPs, and Grant has got his 9th MVP in a row. So anyway, congratulations to that. He's known as a scary DBA, but I've met him in person, and he's not scary. He's actually a very good presenter, and he's great at helping you out with questions. I'm going to turn it over to Grant right now. Thank you. And
excellent, thanks. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Let me make you presenter.
All right, give me 1 second. Okay, should be up.
Looks good.
Excellent. All right, thanks. Thanks for the kind introduction. For SQL Saturday events, by the way, there's one coming up in Louisville in August. I'm doing a pre-con for, so if you want to come and talk query tuning with me for a whole day, I'd love to help you out. So that's in Louisville, Kentucky, in August. Anyway, let's talk about DevOps. I keep going here. The goals here, I want to talk about methods and approaches, and then I want to talk about tools. And the main thing to understand when we start talking about DevOps is not about tools. DevOps is primarily about communication, and we'll get into it and talk about it. But you know, and I'm going to go over tools. I mean, I'm a nerd. I freely admit it. I know a lot of you guys are nerds. Not all of you. Some of you are actually smart, capable people, but a lot of us are nerds. And we're going to talk about the nerd stuff. But mainly, I want to emphasize just how much that this is about communication. This is about mechanisms for communication, and it's about starting to work with your dev teams. So just real quick, my name is Grant Fritchey. I work for Redgate Software, and I've written a couple of books on stuff, and I've been an MVP for 9 years now. This is my contact information. If you've got questions after today, on this topic or any other topic, I want you to get in touch with me. This is my email address, that's my blog, that's my Twitter handle. You get in touch, I will do my level best to answer any questions you have. You know, if you send me some really long thing, it looks like I'm going to be employed by you for a couple of years, you might not get the best answer. But you've got stuff that you know you want help on, I will do my best to help. That's what I'm here for. So now, DevOps is hard to define. There's a lot of stuff goes into it, and so when we start talking about it, things get really, really wordy. Now, I pulled this from Gartner. I like Gartner as a source. They have a tendency to summarize things somewhat, although this doesn't look like a summary. But you know, we can go through this and we can start to pluck out some interesting stuff. Now, for example, DevOps is not simply about, you know, you tick some box at your employer. It's about changing the culture. You're not going to be a DevOps shop simply by declaring, hey, we're now a DevOps shop, or you hire some DevOps expert, you know, or you assign, you know, Bob over there is now our DevOps person. It's not going to work. What it is all about is it's a change in your culture. It's a change in the way you do things. It's a change in the way you communicate, and you have to focus on that first. Now, we can keep pulling out bits and words here too. So another thing that we're going to pull out is the concept of Agile or Lean. I mean, these are sort of interchangeable, but sort of not. Basically, they arrive at the same place, and it's doing enough. Not doing everything up front, but doing enough. Doing things so that you're moving quickly, you're making lots of incremental changes, small changes done fast. That's what Agile and Lean are all about. Now, don't misconstrue that. Agile and Lean do not preclude thoughtful approaches. Agile and Lean do not preclude planning. Agile and Lean do not preclude backups and disaster recovery or any of these things that we would normally associate with databases, database services, you know, being a DBA. Agile and Lean are just a mechanism of implementation of those processes rather than trying to build an entire DRHA thing all at once. We'll just build it in chunks. We'll build it in small pieces, again, approaching it from an Agile approach, approaching it from a Lean approach, and DevOps takes advantage of this as a mechanism within the DevOps movement. But let's keep pulling stuff out. So we're talking culture, we're talking Agile Lean, but most importantly, we're talking about people and collaboration. It is all about dev and ops. It's about having developers and the operations people work together. It's about coming together as people. It's about having that mechanism of talking to one another, about having that mechanism of communication. Not simply communication of, you know, hey, Susie, how's it going? But that communication of, hey, here's how we're going to deploy our databases, and here's why we're deploying them that way. You know, this is a mechanism of automation that we're going to arrive at so we can move quickly into a production environment, but we're also going to protect our production environment. We're going to put in place checks and balances, backups, all of the stuff that we're used to dealing with now doesn't go away. In fact, it emphasizes itself. It becomes more important. So let's keep plucking things out. I already mentioned automation and tools, and it's a fundamental part of this. So what we want to arrive at is a place where we can, because we're communicating, because we're collaborating, because we're coming at it from an Agile and Lean approach, we can start to bring tooling in and automate these processes and step through how we get things out to a production environment, step through how we go from raw code, you know, working on some developer's laptop someplace, all the way into our production system, and do that not simply safely, but safely and quickly and frequently, and arrive at that through automation, because the more we automate, the more we're going to get things right. It's far too easy for human beings to screw things up. which is why we bring in automation, which is why we bring in tooling, is to eliminate as much of the human factor as we can from that process. Now, not to say that humans are eliminated. This is, DBAs don't panic. Not only do you have a job here, your job becomes more important here. So it's not anything's going away. It's that we're focusing on process and methodologies and automation in support of people. So let's take all of this craziness and bring it into a simple statement. Okay, so we've got all that stuff together. We've plucked it all out of that complex statement that they had. And so DevOps is what we're looking for is, and I never read slides, but I'm going to read this one. It's an agile culture that better supports collaboration between people, that uses automation and tooling in support of process. So it's really not that crazy. The first time I heard first time I heard DevOps, I understood exactly what people meant. I went, well, wait a minute, isn't that just work? I mean, isn't that just showing up to your job? Because I always thought that we were supposed to be coordinating together. I always thought we were supposed to be working towards automating our processes. I always thought that we were supposed to be collaborating. I never understood that we weren't doing these things, except for the fact that I had been involved in more than a few of the dev DBA fights. It's one of the ways I earned my nickname, actually. But ultimately you realize that what you've got to do is our common goal is the business. And so it's not, oh, I'm a DBA, all I care about is backups. No, you care about the business. You want to keep the business in support. I'm a dev, all I care about is deployments. No, you actually want to, make sure that you're supporting the business. We all want to support the business, and so DevOps is a mechanism that allows us to change our internal culture so that we better support our business. And that's what we're aiming for. Any questions so far? By the way, if you guys have questions, please feel free to interject. We'll capture them and I'll answer them on the fly. We won't have to wait till the end. Also, if you have comments, you may want to send those to me in email because I don't want to sidetrack the discussion too much. But any questions, just bring them in. All right. So development, a lot of times people talk about development as a pipeline. And so, we start off and we're doing, we're building out our databases, we're building out our code. We then do some sort of build that, goes through some kind of integration or performance test. It goes through some sort of pre-production process, and then it lands in our production server. Yeehaw. I really honestly dislike this approach. It's not actually true. Anyone out there who has developed an application one time, delivered it to production one time, walked away, never ever to touch that application again, get in touch with me, I want to talk. And that doesn't count if you left that job or you left that project or something else along those lines. I mean, you literally put it in place and then never ever made another change. You know that that's not true. You know that everything that goes in, either we had a bug and you had to fix it, or there was a change in requirements and so we had to make a change. There was a new business process and so we had to make a change. We bought a new company and therefore we had to make a change. Change is going to be a constant here. So in fact, I don't see this as a line, it's a circle. We're not doing one process one time. We are doing a process continually. DevOps and the process of deployment and development of databases, of code, is a constant process. So instead of a straight line into production, you got to think of it as, instead of starting from development, let's start from provisioning. Or let's start from backups, or let's start from release to production. You could start from anywhere on the circle and then you're going to move your way back around to the circle. It's just going to keep going. So if we're going to do development, we work on our code. Once we think it's good, we check it into source control. That fires off a build process. The build process goes through validation and testing. That validation and testing then gets put up into a package. Those packages at some point will get defined as a release. The release goes off into production. Yeehaw, we win. Meanwhile, in production, We are monitoring our servers, we're providing backups for all of our servers, and we're identifying things that may need to be optimized, changed, improved. We're then moving those processes back down to our production environment, and then off we go again, starting development. And it continues in this circle. It never, ever, ever stops. And if that doesn't get you excited, you need to reinvigorate the passion about your job, because this is our job. Going through that process 1,000,000 times is what we do. And that's cool. I actually love it. And I love the idea that we can get behind this and start to process this stuff through automation, so that we're no longer just plugging away at trying to get these things out the door in manual fashion. We're moving it out the door through automation, through a process that we all agree on, we all understand, we all comply with, and therefore we're able to automate it and make it fast and easy. And that's the goal, as far as I'm concerned. Make it all easy, because I'm lazy. So the more we can, the more work I can do, so I do less work, I'm a happy camper. All right. Now, I do not want to misconstrue this. I am a huge proponent of DevOps. I am a gigantic proponent of supporting dev teams, of listening to dev teams, of meeting the dev team's needs. And that means, if they request something like Entity Framework, let's figure out the right way to implement it, and let's implement it. If they want some other ORM tool, fine. I'm not crazy about some of the other ORM tools, but we'll figure out the right way to implement those tools, and we'll get it implemented. That is not to say that the seawall is not in place. I absolutely maintain that we must protect our production environments first, and then we move backwards from there. We figure out what it is that we have to do to protect production, and then any other changes, automation, any other processes, any other things that we do in, around DevOps, moving things quickly, fast, and smoothly into our production environment, we do. But we start with protection of our production environment first. Why? Well, that is one of the things the business is expecting of us as DBAs, as data professionals. We are the people who know how best to protect that production environment. So we need to do that aspect of our job. That is not to say that we then say no to all the development stuff. We say, well, not that way, is the one negative we come up with. Not that way. Yeah, we'll do what you want, but not that way. We need to do it this way in order to protect production. But we're still going to get done what you need to get done. But we have to protect production. That doesn't go away. That never changes. That's an absolute. It's a rock solid seawall, just like you see here. Now, that said, the other aspect of this is that we do need to shift left. And the shift left concept is pretty simple. The idea here is that we cannot simply sit on our old methods of doing things and have this barrier wall that everything runs up to, and then no one's ever seen production or production-like environments until they get to production. Shift left says we need to make as much of the other environments look like production as we possibly can. Now, nothing's ever going to be exactly like production, granted, but you shift as much left as you can. You shift as much out of the production environment and down into the testing, QA, pre-prod, and frankly down onto the laptops of the developers. As much as you can, you move things towards development so that development looks as much as possible like your production servers. Now you may say, oh my gosh, Grant, we've got a 20 terabyte database that we run in production. One, I've got some help for you to make it possible for that to shift left. But two, yeah, that's going to be harder to deal with. So you're going to have some issues there, and yes, that's going to make it so that maybe your pre-prod and other environments are not an exact mirror of production, but you get them as close as you can. You may have regulatory compliances you have to meet. You may be working for a business, that works in healthcare, or some of the insurance businesses, or certain of the banking and investment businesses, where there's a hardcore legal requirements, international treaties even, some of which leading to jail time if you expose data, knowingly expose data to people who are not authorized. So yes, shift left adds some work here. It adds some labor here, but the idea of a fast automated deployment means that we need to have a consistent and clean test environment and a consistent and clean dev environment, and the way we make our dev environments and test environments better is to shift everything left to ensure that we're as much as possible working off production systems. We still have to protect everything, we still have to avoid that prison sentence, but we want to move things to the left. Now, how do we do it? Well, let's start talking about it. The simplest, most common thing that you have to accept right out of the gate. I mean, and I recognize this is the fundamentals group, so I actually love talking to you guys more than I want to talk to the jaded guys who've been doing this for 20 years. Because the guys who've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years, they're going to go, yeah, we tried that in 1973, it didn't work. Don't worry, the phone's ringing, but it's nothing important. The fact is, database is code. And if you don't believe me, well, let me just ask you this. How do you create a table? Is it a T-SQL statement? Yes, it is. Is that T-SQL statement code? Yes, it is. The insert statement, the delete statement, the update statement, all code. The statements needed to create agent jobs, code. Everything inside of a database is code. So let's treat our database as code. Let's do what developers do. What's the first things developers do? All code goes into source control. Okay, cool. Let's put our databases into source control. It's not that hard. There's a lot of tools out there. I'm going to show you one set, but there's 4 or 5 different sets that'll do it. A bunch of different ways to get it done. So let's get our database in source control. Let's start there, treating our database as code. Next up is isolation. Isolation means that we have to be able to develop our databases without interference with others. Meaning, if you've got 2 developers, if developer A makes a change and it breaks developer B's code, developer B is offline while they try to figure out what's going on. Developer A and developer B need to be able to operate independently. It's how they do it with application code. They need to be able to do that with database code as well. And then finally, you have to have testing. Testing's the hard part because you have to pick and choose where and what you test. It's not like, unfortunately, this is not like application code where you're going to write a code for every line. You don't need a test to validate that an insert statement works, because the insert statement is going to tell you whether or not it worked real fast. But if you've got some major database data processing step or something else, you may need to develop tests for that as well. And all of this goes into your source control. So let's start there. Now, I already saw a comment. Someone said, you know, hey, there's, oh no, this is a different state. So then we're going to talk about build. Now, there's 3 ways to do build. The first way is state management. State management is very, very straightforward. You compare from a database to a database. You compare between a database and source control. You compare between something and something else. Whatever it is you're comparing to, that's a state-based approach. There's a number of different tools out there that use a state-based approach. They work well. They have some problems. Some of the main problems they have is that they're not very agile. They do require you to generate code, and generated code can frequently lead to issues. Trust me, I know. It absolutely does. Now, the other mechanism you can try is migrations. Now, migrations is basically creating a manifest, a script of scripts, if you would. Basically, a line of scripts that stack together and take your database from state A to state B, but through a set of migration scripts. Now, these work extremely well. They're easy to understand. Developers a lot of times love this approach. However, this also runs into issues because the development process is frequently messy. It's supposed to be, and you want it to be. No one should ever go in and try to make development clean. Development should be a nightmare, Dodge City on a Saturday night kind of environment, and that's fine. But as it moves to production, we need to clean it up somehow. The migration script approach does run into the idea of like, well, we added a column, then we dropped it, we added it, we dropped it, we added it, gave it a default, but then we changed our mind and dropped it. Now, on a dev environment with, 100 rows, who's going to notice? if you add, drop, add, drop, add, drop. But on a production environment with 1 million rows, 10 million rows, 100 million rows, 10 billion rows, you add, drop, and suddenly that deployment is taking hours, days, and it's blocking processes, and there's a major issue. So migrations has its own issue. Now, the hybrid approach is the one I prefer. It's harder because you do have to work on, some processes to establish state, but then you migrate from state to state, and that makes things a lot easier because you're able to know that we're in one place and then have the migration scripts to get to a second. There's a bit more work in getting this in this kind of approach done, and there's occasionally some manual intervention needed, but using these approaches will make things a little easier. Now, as far as validation and testing goes, a lot of times people talk about, well, if you're doing test-based development, you write a test first and you write the code. And the thing is that doesn't, I've tried it with T-SQL and I found it just didn't work that well. It caused me all kinds of problems. It slowed down some of our processes, and we kind of threw it away and went a different approach. And the base thing I can tell you is to just write one test at a time. Don't get overly concerned with writing 1,000 tests for your system right out of the gate. Write one. The best test you can have is your very first build. If you can do a build and you can do a deployment, that in and of itself is a test. So if you're able to deploy your database, you've tested it. Now, if you do your deployment and you run some code and then something breaks, hey, the first thing that breaks, that's your first test. As you find things that are going to break on you, then you want to say, okay, well, wait a minute, we need a test to validate this. And it's only worrying about the things that break. I mean, a stored procedure script is going to deploy successfully, or it's not because there's bad code in it. But if there's bad code in it, you're going to identify that quickly, fix that code, and then deploy it. You do not need a test then to validate that it deployed. If it deployed, it deployed. You don't need to go and test that. But the processes within that stored procedure, they may be complex enough that you need to write a test for that. In which case, that's your first test. Start writing that stuff and move forward from there. Now, packaging everything. We want to put our databases into source control, and we want to start treating our databases as code. But, as was already commented on here, databases are not exactly the same. There is a difference in databases, and that difference is very, very fundamental, and that's the fact that there's data in there. The data must persist, right? A fundamental part of our protecting our production environment is protecting the data in production. So we can't get away from that. We're not going to try to get away from that, but we want to marry our application and database code. We want it to go together, we want it to deploy together, and the reason I say that is because we want everything to be branched together or versioned or however it is, whichever source control system you're using, whatever mechanism it uses for marking, this is release 1.1, this is release 2.3, whatever it is, and there's different ways of doing it. I'm not going to try to dictate that to you. You guys will figure it out working with your dev teams. But you want them to go together. And the reason is that you then know when someone says, hey, this is version 4.4 of the application, you know that that's 4.4 of the database, and you can go into your source control, pull up version 4.4, do a deployment of version 4.4, and ta-da, you're working off of code the same as your production server, because you're going from a known definition. You're not trying to guess, well, 4.4, we released that when? I think I might have a backup from that day. If my database, maybe. It gets really weird and complex. But if you treat all your databases as code and marry that code to your production server so that they are packaged together, labeled or branched together, and then go and get deployed together, then you have a known state that you're working from, and you're working along those lines. So that's what we have to get to. Now, the release. This is where things get really entertaining. Because when you're doing stuff inside a development environment, you're controlling all the changes that occur, even if you're working with source control, even with you're bringing things together. And when you package up a set of builds from your source control environment and you publish it or push it out to the main source control environment, that's great and that's awesome. But what happens is that that's then getting married with other people's code, and other methods and other processes are going on, and it gets worse. It then has to go into, say, let's say we put it into a development integration testing environment, either a continuous integration environment or something else, but it's still in dev, it's still under control of developers, and that's great. All of our deployments should work, everything will be fine. But then we have to hop environments and go to QA or testing. And in our QA or testing environment, we have a different security setup than we have in dev. Why? Well, because people shouldn't be writing code in QA. QA should only be for running code. So we've changed the processes, we changed the access, and suddenly we've got a release that's going from this known controlled environment to this somewhat unknown, somewhat uncontrolled environment. We need to be able to mark what it is that we're releasing. We need to mark that in our source control system, and then we need to validate it in some way that we know that it deployed successfully. And this is where we start getting into testing. So testing allows us to go between environments and validate that things work and that things have deployed successfully, that that the 400 objects we think we were going to deploy are the 400 objects that got deployed, and that the database is still intact, and that the data is not gone, and that the security is still in place. So all of this is where things get really hard. So release is where you manage that part of the process. Now, we've defined the release, we're able to get out into production. Yay, awesome. Now we got to monitor. That means you got to keep an eye on your servers. You have to set up monitoring. I'm sure you guys have had probably multiple sessions on monitoring and different ways to do that. I'm not going to get into it in detail. Just remember that monitoring starts before you ever deploy anything. You have to have monitoring in place before you start sweating deployment. But you want to make sure that you're monitoring before deployment, during deployment, and after deployment. And the main reason I say that is because you want to measure how did that deployment affect my system, positively, negatively, or neutrally. You want to have known quantities to be able to say, hey, query A ran in 5 seconds before the deployment. During the deployment, query A was blocked, but we're okay with that because we knew it was going to come. But after the deployment, query A was running in 3 seconds. Yeehaw, we win, it ran faster. Or after the deployment, query A is now running in 10 seconds. Uh-oh, what happened? We need to go back and do another fix and do another deployment and get this thing out the door quickly. And or possibly we may even need to do a rollback, although I'm not a huge fan of rollbacks. We could talk about that in the Q&A if we have time. Finally, monitoring is a big thing that's going to drive innovation and tuning, because you're going to be able to spot what's going on, the way things are behaving, if things are degrading over time, and then drive back through your circle, back into the process to keep things going forward from there. All right, and so provision is just basically taking your stuff out of production and shifting it left. You definitely want to make it as self-service as possible so developers can reset their systems anytime they want. QA can set the reset as needed, which means you're going to have to automate it as much as you can. You can't have too many manual processes, otherwise it will not work. But we will not sacrifice the protection of our production environment. So we must be able to shift left with these environments, shift left with this data, while protecting our production environment. So we can't get away from that fact. That doesn't go away. So that's all the processing, that's all the fun. Let's start talking toys, all right? Everybody okay with that? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to start off, I'm going to be working in Visual Studio. The tools I'm going to use are, I'm going to primarily be using Visual Studio, and I'm going to be using a free tool inside of Visual Studio called ReadyRoll. It's deployed by Microsoft. It's part of the modern Visual Studio suite. It's nothing you're paying for. It's completely Microsoft driven, and so we're going to get started with it. What I've done is I'm also using Team Services. Let me zoom over here onto the right side of the screen. I've got team services set up, and I am using the online team services. You'll notice I'm at scarydba.visualstudio.com. So I've got my own little project here called Movie Management, and it's a little database that I use for these kinds of testing. It's very small. I keep it small just because it makes the testing and deployment easy. Not that a larger database wouldn't prove anything more than a smaller database will in this case, because you still want to make sure that your deployments are agile and lean, which means lots of small, frequent deployments. That wouldn't hurt a big database any more than a small one. So no big deal. Anyway, that's what we're working on. I've got all my code right now is in Git. So I've got to do like a little double phase commit here when we make a change, and that's pretty much it. Let's take a look at it. Now I've got a local database here. This is over here on the left. This is SQL Server. And we can see the databases. There are none. Nothing there. Hey, look, movie management. What if we went into here and let's take a look at stored procedures. There are none. Okay, cool. So that's all not working. Oh my gosh, it's broken. Well, no, it's not. Let's go. Hey, you guys are DBAs. Let's go to Management Studio. You guys ever heard of that? Anybody? One second. Hope it doesn't load up the code that I was testing earlier. It doesn't. Good. That would be embarrassing. So what I'm going to do is I want to go over to here. I'm going to go to Movie Management. I want to do a new query. And what we're going to do is we're just going to create a store procedure. Uh-oh, my machine's running slow. Come on, baby. I've had the worst luck with demos lately. Hang on one second. There we go. Create procedure DBO.DBA fun for the DBA fundamentals group. Yes. So we'll just pull data out of agent. It's a very simple store procedure. So we've created a store procedure. Yay! Let's go back to Visual Studio. Now I'm going to use ReadyRoll down here. I'm going to hit refresh. Now ReadyRoll looks at my database. It knows which database that I'm working in. I'm working within Movie Management. And it knows that I've just created a new store procedure. Awesome. Well, let's do a refresh. That's going to pull that store procedure out. Oh, wait, hang on. Add to project. Helps if you get it right, huh? So I'm going to import that store procedure, add it to my script. There we go. Let's do a refresh. It's going to validate that that script is in place and that it's done correctly, and it is. And we can now see that there's a new change over here that's been added in already. There's the new change. We can tell that it came in the day and the time and all that fun stuff. So let's zoom back out. Now that's all in there. Let's go in and we're going to now add that to source control. Let's go. Come on, move over. There we go. Now we're adding this into our source control system. So that means we're able to capture our changes from our database and put them directly into source control. No actual extra work is needed. All of these steps that I'm doing here that I can show you can actually all be automated as well. Now we must always comment our code, comment our check-ins. We're adding a procedure for DBA fun demo that pulls info from agent. So now I'm going to commit these changes. So now these changes have committed locally into my source control system. But this is Git. Now I'm tracking my changes locally, so this is, think of this like a DB, as a developer or a DBA working locally on their code, validating stuff, working along, everything's working, okay, cool, I'm happy. Let me push this up to the main repository. So I'm going to sync and I'm going to push, and this is going to take the procedure. You just notice that the comment's exactly what we put in here before, adding a procedure for DBA fun, and I'm going to push that up to my environment, and that's going to now store that up into the main source control system. So now what I've got is I've got my database code is getting pulled out, changes are getting pulled out, they're automatically getting moved into source control, and I'm done, right? That's the end of the story. You guys can all go home a little early, and we're finished. Not exactly. Let's go back over to here. Now this is my source control system, and you can see, let me refresh this. That it was updated just a minute ago. See that? And that's from us adding, hey, look at that, adding a procedure for DBA fun demo. So my source control system up on the cloud, out in the world, is maintaining my code, and my database code is coming in. So this is exactly the same mechanisms we would be using if we were doing application code. Now, let's take a look at another thing. What I've got is I've got local agents running, and they don't have to be local. It's just the way I've got this set up. I've got it all set up on a single environment so I can bounce around and show you everything. But you could have it on multiple servers. You would probably have it on multiple servers. And what I'm doing is I'm doing a build to a local dev integration server. And that dev integration server build is fired off already. It's happened automatically when I checked my code into source control. I don't have to do anything to make that happen because I've set it all up. Let me show you what I did. This is all built into TFS. This is all part of Team Foundation Services. This is all from Microsoft. This is nothing extra that I've added. This is all Microsoft tooling that I'm using here. I just want you guys to know that. So the first thing I do is I'm going to get from source control, and you can see it shows you precisely what's coming in. I'm doing this project. The repository is this name. I'm going from a particular branch. For my purposes here, I've only got a single branch, but you may have multiple branches. And I'm pulling that information in, and we're running it. It does a NuGet restore, which creates a NuGet package. Great. I'm going to build my Visual Studio solution. Awesome. Nice, straightforward stuff. And the Visual Studio build does include what is my server, and the shadow server is my local server. What is my database? It's movie management, development, integration, and then is it generating a SQL package? And yes, it is. It's generating a SQL package. All of this is built into Microsoft. It's all built in. And then I'm going to copy and publish the artifacts. What is an artifact? It is a database package. What database package is it? It is a NuGet package. What's a NuGet package? Ain't nothing but a zip file with some T-SQL inside. It's nice and straightforward. So what it's doing is it's taking those migrations that I've got and it's putting those together into a build. I'm not done there. There are a lot of moving pieces to making this work, by the way. I've also got releases established. Now the release, in this case, it's using ReadyRoll, which is built into, again, built into Visual Studio. And so it's taking the packages that I've just deployed. I've got release versions, and you can control this. Mine right now just says 1, but we could change that as needed. And it's got a target server that it's going to and the database that it's going to. And this takes my database and deploys it. This is straight up the deployment process. Now it can generate artifacts, and the artifacts it's going to generate is a T-SQL statement and a report showing me exactly what was moved. The variables can be anything, but mostly what it's going to be is security as I move from one environment to the next. And then you can talk about all the other stuff that gets to be built up. But the main thing that we get here is, oops, went to the wrong one. The main thing that we get here is that each one of these things, just zoom in so you can see what happened. Each one of these things defines a release, and a deployment, and they're all occurring automatically. And if I want to, I can add in testing, so I can put in test validations. I don't have any currently set up for this, or I can do whatever else that I need to add to this. And this is all built into Visual Studio. Now, are there any questions right now? Usually this is when they start to come out. Let me just pop out the questions thing. Ready roles, that's something we need to add to Visual Studio. It is an add-on to Visual Studio, but it's built. It's an add-on from Visual Studio. It's built. It's completely in the Visual Studio box. You check a little button, you get Ready Roll. What version of TFS am I using? I am using the cloud version, so it's the latest version. I'm doing the online one because it makes my demos way easier to maintain because I do it it's all up on the cloud and everything works really well. From any place I go, so I don't have to worry about maintaining a TFS environment locally. What a nightmare. I'm lazy. I don't want to have to do TFS installs. ReadyRoll is actually a Redgate product. ReadyRoll was built by Redgate, but it is a built-in tool inside of Visual Studio. The reason I'm demoing it straight up is because it came from Visual Studio. I'm not demoing something you have to buy. Available for Enterprise Edition. I don't know what the licensing is. I thought it was built into the regular stuff. All I have is a development version. So I don't know. I don't know that. It's free. You don't spend a penny for it. And so that's basically how it runs. I mean, and the whole idea here is that it's all done through Visual Studio. TFS is free. TFS is free in tiers. Yes, it's free, but it's not free. If you have depending on your level of MSDN license, you have a varying level of TFS. It completely depends on your MSDN license, but you have to buy an MSDN license to get into it. So that much. After that, it's free. Yes. And Git and GitHub. Which is what I am using for my source control. That's a free-ish. It's free if you publish everything. If you want it private, you have to pay for that. So this stuff is available someplace. If you want to go and look at it, it's really crappy code, but you can look at it anytime you want to. All right. So that's the toys. So I recommend some reading, guys. Please, please, please. Take a look at these. These are already published out on slideshare.net, so you guys can get these slides yourselves. These 4 articles are really some of the more foundational and fundamental for DevOps. They're not. These are not articles that are getting it, deep, dark into how to run TFS, deep, dark into how to do some of the automation stuff that I just showed. This is very much just a general overview of lifecycle management and DevOps, DevOps for the database, shift left because of the importance around that, and so hopefully that'll help. Hopefully this went through. We talked about methods and approaches and some of the best practices, and I did show the tooling. We can drill down on the tooling some more. We got about 5 minutes left. So I don't want to cut you guys short, but I wanted to make sure I left a little bit of time for any kind of Q&A. Any questions at all? Okay, any questions on another topic?
we did get a question in from Slack just wondering if you've got a table with a couple of million rows, how do you choose which actual data point source control? Like terms of provisioning, is there a difference between seeding and modeling the data, or just everything goes?
So if I've got millions of rows, all right, that gets hard. Hang on, let me switch back over here for a second. So, all right, so you've got a few choices. Choice number 1, and it's the worst possible choice. Just use an empty database and everything will be fine. Don't do that. Choice number 2, and it's almost as bad as choice number 1. Load in 4, 5, 10 rows and everything will be fine. That's really, really a poor choice. Choice number 3 is to create some kind of data load script that will load a representative sample. You don't want to load millions of rows. It's going to take too long. But you could load in, easily 100,000. It takes 5-10 minutes. It'll be quick enough for you to do this kind of stuff. So you're going to do that, and it'll be fine. And that'll work pretty well. It won't be perfect. So then your other option is to start looking at some type of advanced provisioning. And that's getting into third-party tooling and other mechanisms. If you really want to get into it, the one thing I would recommend is using, you might want to take a look at Redgate's SQL Clone. It is a provisioning tool for doing multi-terabyte systems in seconds. So it's pretty cool. But I'm not going to do a demo of that right now. That's not this kind of presentation. But that's the one I would recommend. So that should answer that one. Let's see. How do you take care of partial code moving to the next environment? Okay, so one, each set of code. All right, so this is where things get fun. The best way to manage the code is through branching, because branching allows you to have various subset definitions of your code. And so branch A is the main trunk, the mainstream release cycle. Branch B is what's currently in production, or you could switch those. Branch B is currently in branch A is currently in production. Branch B is new development. Branch C is hot fixes. And so you could have 3 different branches and 3 different development streams. All of them should be off the main trunk, but each one can be individual. And so let's say you're doing the hotfix stream. Well, you make sure that you only do the changes inside of that one branch, get those changes in, and then that branch will go out to the production environment. You can combine that with labeling inside of source control systems, but by and large, branching generally works better. And so a partial code deployment, well, then we have to get into a weird definition. Partial code deployment, why would we do partial anything? You need to do one complete change, one complete set of changes. Because if you're only moving, we'll only move the database change, but the code isn't ready, you'll hit issues. So you've got to move it together. So I mean, defining partial gets weird. If you just mean small, that's great. That's what we want. But you're going to have to define it through your source control system so you can differentiate sets of changes. If you just do everything in one big batch and then say, okay, well now we want to pluck out these 4 changes, you're in a world of pain. There's no real way to automate that. You have to do it all manually. So that's why you would want to say, okay, look, we've got this giant set of changes. We're going to create a branch that only has 4 changes in it, and then deploy those 4 changes individually, and then you're better off. Let's see, recommendations on reference data and lookups. Yes, if it's small, and by small I mean say 250 rows or less approximately, put that into source control. Have it just a series of insert scripts, or upsert probably. You'd want to make sure that you can manage them. But if it's small, put it into source control. If it's bigger, things get really messy really fast when it's bigger. But let's say that you have a centralized set of code tables that are used across your enterprise. I would then create a code table management system. That's done it twice, once successfully, once failing. So it's not easy, but that's the best way to do that, is for big stuff. The small stuff, it goes right into source control, and that works real well. Most tools can deal with it one way or another. SQL Server data tools inside of Microsoft, not so good with it. Some of the other tooling is a little bit better. Potential drawback on state-based approach. State-based approach, the problem we run into is that state-based doesn't always work. You have to have migrations as well. For example, let's say that you have a column that you need to split, is the classic, but no one ever splits a column, so let's not use that one. Let's say you want to add a column and supply it with a particular set of data, but you don't want to create a default. Now you got to write some scripting to put all that stuff together inside of a deployment, and you won't be able to do that through state-based. You'll have to add some kind of migration, either through a hybrid approach or some other mechanism. Pre-prod and pre and post deployment scripts are a great way to get around that. Let's see. Do encrypted store procedures present any challenges? Not really. Encrypted store procedures, you know that they're, by the way, you know they're not really encrypted, right? There's a very, 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 very easy way to unencrypt them. But let's talk encrypted databases. Does that present any challenge? Not at all. As long as we've got the appropriate certificates and stuff in place within the system, it doesn't change anything. Currently using Redgate source control seems to work sufficiently. Thoughts? Oh, Michael, I work for Redgate Software. It's the greatest thing in the world. Of course it's great. Probably not the answer you're looking for. No, I love source control. It works really, really well. The issues that it has are around state-based and migrations. It does have the migrations tool built in. That does have some problems, I freely admit. So you may hit some issues when it comes to that. So all the DBAs will now need an MSDN license. Yeah, David, it really kind of depends on how you're going to manage this stuff. If you'll notice, I created the store procedure inside of Management Studio and then use Visual Studio to do all the check-ins and stuff. You wouldn't have I did it all manually. You wouldn't have to do it manually yourself. You could automate all of that through the command line. And then Mark says that's what I was thinking. Oh, state-based approach. Yeah, state-based approach. It's that fact that there are certain changes that require migrations is the reason people reject state-based for migrations. But then migrations introduces another set of issues. Neither of them is perfect. Both of them are a little bit problematic. Okay, and we are out of time and out of questions at the same time. Wow, that's timing. Look at that. Again, just before we go, please feel free to get in touch with me. Ask me any questions after today. I do my best to answer all my email. You know, even if it's I'm on vacation, I'm not going to answer you right now. I promise you I'll get back to you at some point. And that's it. That's all I've got. Those are my photo credits. Anything else from you guys?
No, we just wanted to thank you for speaking today and sharing your knowledge and experience in such an easy way to understand. I kind of, for myself, I don't really think it's a very intuitive topic, so it was nice to get, you know, a nice little demonstration of knowledge about it.
Oh, no, not a problem. Thank you. And again, I'll be honest, the tools are not easy. The tools are easy, but there's a lot of moving parts to the tools, and it becomes problematic hooking it all together. But just take it, you know, treat it like an elephant. Eat it one bite at a time, and you'll get through it just fine.
Yeah, I've tried to use Git before. I think not easy is kind of an understatement, but you get there eventually. And we do also want to say congrats as well for the 2018-2019 presidency of PASS. You got elected the last day. So just congratulations on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. No, we're actually just going to finish up. Just say congratulations to Brian Manning. He recently won one of our awards for an Amazon gift card with us. And apart from that, the sessions are being recorded and will be available in our archive session within a week. And we should hopefully get some slides and scripts off you. I don't know actually if we will not, Grant. They're actually up. I think you have them up on the website.
Yeah, these slides are available on slideshare.net.
Yeah, perfect.
So you guys can pull it from there if you want. I mean, feel free.
And apart from that, I think we're good to go. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Have a good day, guys.
Yeah.